In 1969, the United States Air Force closed Project Blue Book after 22 years of reported sightings. Hundreds of cases in its files still lacked a conventional explanation. But that is not the part that stayed classified. The unsettling detail is simpler. The files became public, yet their meaning remained fiercely disputed. They contain reports, drawings, photographs, interviews, calculations, and official conclusions. They also contain omissions, uneven investigations, and questions that were never resolved. Those facts can coexist. Understanding Blue Book requires holding them together. Project Blue Book was the Air Force program for collecting and evaluating reports of unidentified flying objects. Its surviving records are held by the National Archives and Records Administration. NARA describes the broader investigation period as running from 1947 through 1969. Blue Book itself followed two earlier Air Force efforts. Those programs were called Project Psi and Project Greg. The name changed, but the central problem remained. People were reporting unfamiliar things in American skies. Some witnesses were military pilots, others were police officers, weather observers, scientists, or ordinary residents. The Air Force had to decide whether any report indicated a threat. It also had to explain cases produced by weather, astronomy, aircraft, balloons, or mistakes. There is a detail here most people never learn. I will get to it. Blue Book was not one continuous, uniform investigation. Its standards, personnel, priorities, and institutional support changed over time. A case reviewed carefully in one year might receive very different treatment in another. The archive records a program, but also its changing level of attention. The historical setting matters. In 1947, the Cold War was taking shape. New aircraft flew higher and faster, radar networks expanded, nuclear weapons transformed military planning, Soviet capabilities were a Central American concern. A strange object might be harmless. It might also be a foreign aircraft, a secret domestic project, or an error inside a warning system. That uncertainty created an operational challenge. Investigators rarely reached a scene while an event was happening. They worked afterward. They relied on witness memory, local weather records, astronomical tables, radar logs, photographs, and physical traces. Each source had limits. A sincere witness could still misjudge distance. A radar return could be real without being an aircraft. The term unidentified also caused lasting confusion. In the files, it did not automatically mean extraordinary. It often meant that available information did not support a confident identification. A report could remain open because evidence was incomplete. Another could remain unidentified after substantial review. The label described an investigative outcome. It did not identify a cause. That distinction is the key to the entire archive. A case marked unexplained establishes that investigators lacked a satisfactory explanation. It does not establish an extraterrestrial vehicle. It also does not prove that nothing unusual occurred. The record stops at the limit of the evidence. Later claims often continue far beyond that point. The files grew because reports kept arriving. Witnesses described lights, disks, formations, rapid movements, hovering objects, and unusual radar tracks. Investigators compared these accounts with known sources. Bright planets could appear to move when clouds crossed the sky. Meteors could seem closer than they were. Balloons could look rigid at great distance. Aircraft lights could create unfamiliar patterns. Some explanations were straightforward. Others depended on probability rather than direct proof. That difference matters. A file might list a likely astronomical object without showing a perfect match. It might identify an aircraft based on timing and direction. The surviving paperwork may show the reasoning or only the final category. The strength of an explanation varies from case to case. The archive is therefore not a single answer. It is a collection of thousands of investigative decisions. Those decisions range from detailed analysis to brief administrative closures. Reading only the most unusual reports distorts the program. Reading only the official summary also loses important texture. The difficult history exists between those two shortcuts. Early Air Force concern was genuine. Officials did not create these projects merely as public theater. Reports entered military channels because unidentified objects could have defense implications. That does not mean officials accepted an extraterrestrial theory. It means they considered unexplained aerial observations worthy of organized attention during a tense strategic period. The official posture also evolved. Project Zion began in 1948, after the wave of reports that started the previous year. Project Grudge followed in 1949. Blue Book began in 1952. These changes reflected internal debates about evidence, threat, and public interest. They did not represent a steady march toward one hidden conclusion. Captain Edward J. Ruppelt became one of the program's best-known officers. He directed the effort during an important early Blue Book period. Under his leadership, procedures became more systematic. Standard questionnaires and reporting methods helped investigators compare cases. Consultants were used. Yet even improved procedures could not recover measurements that witnesses had never made. That limitation followed every report. Witnesses often lacked a reliable distance. Without distance, apparent size could not reveal actual size. Without actual size, speed estimates became uncertain. A light crossing part of the sky might be nearby and slow, it might be distant and fast. The same visual path could support radically different calculations. Radar seemed to promise better evidence. Sometimes it did. Radar could provide range, direction, and movement unavailable to the eye. Yet early radar systems also produced returns from weather, interference, equipment behavior, and propagation effects. A visual report paired with radar deserved attention. It still required careful synchronization and technical records. This became especially important during reports near Washington, D.C. In July 1952, radar operators detected unusual returns and observers reported lights. Interceptors were sent into the area. The events received intense press coverage. Air Force officials held a large news conference. Temperature inversions and radar propagation became part of the official explanation. The documents established that the incidents were taken seriously. They also show efforts to interpret difficult radar and visual evidence. The surviving record does not establish an extraterrestrial presence over Washington. It does not make every reported return meaningless either. It shows how technical ambiguity can become a national story before investigators reach agreement. That was real. Public pressure shaped the program. Newspapers, radio, magazines, and later television carried dramatic accounts. Each prominent sighting encouraged more people to look upward. Increased attention produced more reports. More reports created further coverage. The Air Force was investigating events while also managing a public information problem. Those missions did not always fit comfortably together. A defense organization values useful intelligence. It also protects sensitive capabilities. Public explanations could not always describe every aircraft, sensor, or operation. This created suspicion, even when secrecy concerned conventional technology. A witness might accurately observe a classified test. The public file could still offer little detail. Silence then became material for a much larger theory. Here, the record requires caution. Some unidentified reports likely involved unfamiliar human technology. Some involved ordinary objects under unusual conditions. Some remain unresolved because the evidence is weak or incomplete. The files do not provide a reliable percentage for every possible cause. They cannot transform missing data into certainty. The Central Intelligence Agency also studied the wider issue. In 1953, the Roberts panel reviewed available information and defense concerns. Its conclusions emphasized possible burdens on communications and warning systems. The panel worried that mass reporting could obscure a genuine threat. It did not validate claims of alien craft. Its recommendations also influenced public education and official messaging. That history is often presented as proof of a predetermined cover-up. The surviving record supports a narrower conclusion. Officials worried about national security, public reaction, and overloaded reporting channels. They sought to reduce confusion. Those goals could encourage dismissive communication. They do not, by themselves, establish possession of non-human technology. The inversion is important. What seemed like a project devoted only to mysterious craft was also a project about information control. Blue Book sorted observations, defended airspace, answered citizens, and managed institutional credibility. Its files reveal as much about government procedure as aerial phenomena. The mystery was never only in the sky. It was also inside the filing system. Scientific advice entered that system through J. Allen Hynek. The astronomer served as a consultant across much of the Air Force investigation era. He helped assess possible astronomical explanations. Over time, he became critical of aspects of the program and its methods. His later views are part of Blue Book's legacy. They do not erase his earlier casework. Hynek's trajectory illustrates a broader problem. A person could reject weak claims and still believe some reports deserved better study. Skepticism and curiosity were not opposites. the public debate often forced a false choice. Either every case was nonsense, or unexplained cases proved visitation. The archive supports neither position. It records a spectrum of evidence quality. Consider how a single file was built. A report might begin with a letter or military form. Investigators could request a witness statement, maps, sketches, and timing details. Weather and astronomical data might be checked. Nearby bases could be contacted. Analysts then assigned a category. Missing pages or absent supporting records could weaken later review. The final category could look more definite than the process beneath it. A short label concealed competing possibilities. It also concealed the judgment used to select among them. Researchers today may see a conclusion without every conversation that produced it. That is normal archival friction. It is not automatic evidence that a decisive document was removed. Photographs created similar problems. A photograph seems objective, but interpretation depends on context. Investigators need the original negative, camera information, exposure details, location, direction, and witness cooperation. Copies can lose detail. Reflections, processing defects, thrown objects, and double exposures can produce puzzling images. A striking picture is not necessarily strong evidence. Physical evidence was rarer. Reports sometimes mention marks, damaged vegetation, residue, or effects on vehicles. Such claims required prompt collection and controlled testing. Often that standard was impossible. A site could be disturbed before investigators arrived. Samples might lack a documented chain of custody. The files preserve the claim, but preservation does not verify its proposed cause. Geography added another layer. A witness near a military installation might report an object without knowing local flight activity. Investigators could know more, yet face restrictions on what they could disclose. A witness far from any base might receive less attention. The resulting difference could reflect defense priorities rather than evidence quality. Time also worked against investigators. An unusual light could disappear within seconds. Weather conditions could change before anyone measured them. Radar tapes might not be retained for later study. Aircraft records could use a different clock. Even small timing errors could break an apparent match. A prompt report still might lack the decisive detail. Language introduced further compression. Witnesses used familiar words for unfamiliar appearances. A disk might mean a circular object, an oval light, or something seen edge-on. The word formation could describe fixed spacing or only several lights in one area. Investigators had to translate ordinary language into testable geometry. That translation was rarely perfect. Distance was the recurring weakness. The sky offers few reference points, especially at night. A witness might compare an object with a coin held at arm length. That measured apparent size, not physical dimensions. Without known range, analysts could not reliably calculate altitude or speed. Dramatic estimates could therefore rest on one uncertain assumption. Movement posed the same problem. Human eyes make tiny involuntary motions. A stationary light can seem to wander against dark background. Clouds can create an impression of acceleration. A moving observer adds another variable. These effects explain some reports. They cannot simply be applied to every case without checking conditions. Blue Book investigators faced an asymmetry. A conventional identification needed a plausible source matching time, direction, and appearance. An extraordinary claim required stronger evidence than an unexplained impression. When records were incomplete, neither standard could be met. The result was not a draw between equal theories. It was an evidentiary stop. That stop is easy to misread decades later. Modern summaries often remove the original uncertainty language. Likely becomes identified. Unidentified becomes impossible. A witness estimate becomes a measured speed. Repetition hardens a conditional claim into an apparent fact. Returning to the file can reverse that process, but only if every qualifier survives. Witness credibility also demands careful language. A mistaken report is not necessarily dishonest. Perception under unfamiliar conditions is difficult. Memory changes as people retell an event. Questions can shape later descriptions. Multiple witnesses may influence one another. None of this means witnesses saw nothing. It means testimony must be evaluated alongside independent evidence. The Air Force eventually asked the University of Colorado to conduct an independent study. Physicist Edward Condon led the project. The resulting 1,968 report examined selected cases and the broader value of continued research. Its general conclusion was that further extensive study was unlikely to advance science. Critics challenged its methods and emphasis. The Condon report became central to Blue Book's end. The National Academy of Sciences reviewed the study. The Air Force announced the termination of Project Blue Book in December 1969. It found no national security threat in the reports. It found no evidence of technology beyond contemporary knowledge. It also found no evidence of extraterrestrial vehicles. Those were official conclusions. They were not claims that every case had been identified. This is the evidence most retellings miss. The official account said continued Air Force investigation was not warranted. The declassified record showed that individual reports remained unexplained. Institutional closure and complete explanation were never the same thing. The unresolved files became the anchor for later controversy. If even one case remained unidentified, some argued the official conclusions must be false. That reasoning goes too far. An unresolved case can reflect unusual evidence. It can also reflect missing evidence. The category alone cannot distinguish those possibilities. Each case must stand on its own record. How can a program close while cases remain open? Because institutions decide whether further work is likely to serve their mission. They do not always wait for perfect knowledge. The Air Force judged that the collection did not demonstrate a defense threat or extraordinary technology. That policy decision left historical questions behind. It did not secretly answer them. After closure, the records moved into archival custody. The National Archives now provides access to Blue Book material and research guidance. The holdings include case files and related records. All personal information may be redacted under applicable rules. Some motion picture records and other materials may be held in separate archival units. Access structure matters when researchers search for one alleged document. NARA's guidance makes another essential point. The archives has searched its holdings for records, connects with several famous alleged secret projects. It reports that those searches did not locate documentation supporting those claims. An archival search result has a precise meaning. It means staff did not find responsive records in the holdings searched. It does not prove that no person ever used a particular phrase. It does not prove that every federal record survived. It also does not authorize the opposite claim. A missing document cannot be treated as proof of the story it would supposedly confirm. The honest conclusion is narrower. The cited archival record does not substantiate those alleged projects. This limit is especially relevant to claims about Majestic 12, often called MJ-12. Documents circulated publicly in the 1980s and were presented as evidence of a secret group. Questions about their authenticity followed. NARA's Blue Book research guidance reports no records located supporting the alleged project in relevant searches. That archival result undercuts claims of established documentary proof. The same discipline applies to stories connecting Blue Book directly with every famous UFO narrative. Roswell occurred in 1947, before Blue Book began. Later accounts have often folded it into one continuous hidden program. The archival history is more complicated. Different offices, record groups, dates, and investigations cannot be merged merely because later culture placed them together. NARA also explains that it is the custodian of federal records, not the creator of every conclusion inside them. An archived memorandum shows that an agency produced or received that memorandum. It does not make every statement in it true. Reports can contain errors, rumors, second-hand claims, and preliminary judgments. Provenance establishes origin. Corroboration establishes reliability. This is where declassification is often misunderstood. A declassified file is not a newly verified file. Declassification changes its access restrictions. It lets the public inspect material that was once controlled. It does not certify the accuracy of each witness or analyst. It can reveal government interest without proving the event that triggered that interest. The word secret creates a similar trap. Military records may be classified because they mention radar coverage, base procedures, intelligence priorities, or aircraft performance. Their classification does not show that the observed object was extraordinary. Sometimes the sensitive fact was the American response. A mundane observation could expose how quickly fighters launched or which sensors were active. That is the detail promised earlier. Much of the secrecy surrounding aerial reports concerned capabilities, vulnerabilities, and methods. The classified part could be the observer, not the observed. It could be a radar frequency, an intelligence channel, or a test route. When those protections later ended, the released page might still leave the sighting unresolved. That pattern explains why disclosure can increase uncertainty. New records add detail, but they also expose disagreement. One office may favor a balloon explanation. Another may leave the cause open. A later summary may compress both positions. Release does not always produce a clean solution. Sometimes it reveals how provisional the original work really was. The archive also reflects selection. The government collected reports that reached its channels. It did not capture every event witnessed in the country, nor did every report receive equal attention. Local conditions, military relevance, available staff, and public interest affected the paper trail. Statistical claims based on the files must account for that uneven collection process. Numbers carry authority, so they require context. Blue Book's widely cited totals summarize cases under program categories. They do not measure every unusual thing in American skies. They do not tell us that all identified cases were correctly identified. They also do not make unresolved cases equivalent. A total can describe the archive without resolving its contents. The files show repeated tension between speed and depth. Officials wanted quick answers for the public and command structure. Careful investigation took time. Delays could fuel speculation. Premature explanations could damage trust. Once an explanation appeared dismissive, later corrections rarely traveled as far. Blue Book's credibility suffered from both limited resources and confident public language. Critics have pointed to cases where the official explanation seems strained. Those cases deserve case-specific review. A weak explanation should be called weak when the underlying evidence supports that judgment. Yet overturning one explanation does not establish another. Removing a proposed cause returns the case to uncertainty. It does not move the case directly to extraterrestrial origin. Supporters of the official conclusions make the opposite mistake when they treat closure as universal resolution. The Air Force did not identify every report. The archival files preserve unresolved material. A responsive reading accepts that fact without inflating it. Some witnesses encountered events that the available investigation could not explain. That is a historical conclusion, not a cosmic one. Blue Book therefore exposes the boundary between evidence and expectation. People approach the archive wanting confirmation or dismissal. The documents resist both demands. They show serious concern, bureaucratic routine, technical analysis, human error, and durable anomalies. No single page carries the meaning of the whole collection. The pattern emerges only through comparison. The consequence was larger than one closed office. Civilian organizations continued collecting reports. Researchers argued over methods. Popular culture turned Blue Book into shorthand for government secrecy. Congressional interest returned in later decades under different terminology. Military encounters again entered public discussion. Yet those later developments should not be projected backward into every Blue Book case. Modern readers also possess knowledge unavailable to earlier witnesses. Satellite traffic, drones, digital imaging, and updated atmospheric science changed the landscape. But historical cases must be judged using evidence actually preserved. New technology cannot recreate missing measurements from 1952. Better theories do not replace lost radar logs, original negatives, or precise witness locations. The record's limits are not a failure of history. Limits are part of history. They show what institutions chose to collect, what technologies could measure, and what investigators considered important. They reveal how national security shaped public knowledge. They also warn us against turning an archive into an oracle. Records answer only the questions their evidence can bear. For Blue Book, the strongest established facts are institutional. The Air Force investigated reported sightings across the 1947 to 1969 period. It evaluated cases under changing programs and procedures. It ended Blue Book after concluding that continued investigation did not serve its mission. The surviving records entered public archival custody. The strongest negative conclusion is equally precise. The National Archives does not present the Blue Book holdings as proof of extraterrestrial visitation. Its searches did not locate documentation supporting several alleged secret projects. The files do not validate every later story attached to them. They also do not permit us to declare that every witness encountered something ordinary. What remains unknown is narrower than the mythology, but still significant. The causes of some individual reports cannot be established from surviving evidence. The quality of some investigations remains disputed. Missing contested records can prevent confident reassessment. Historians and researchers still disagree about how much weight the best cases deserve. The archive does not settle that debate. What the documents do show is a government confront uncertainty during the Cold War. They show officers trying to separate threats from mistakes. They show scientific advice entering military procedure. They show public messaging colliding with incomplete evidence. They show classification protecting institutional capabilities. They show how unresolved cases survived every official conclusion placed above them. What they do not show is just as important. They do not provide verified proof of alien spacecraft. They do not authenticate every alleged secret program. They do not turn an unexplained label into a known origin. They do not prove that classification itself concealed an extraordinary discovery. Those conclusions require evidence the cited record does not supply. The paperwork also records restraint. Analysts sometimes resisted a confident label when evidence failed them. That restraint deserves preservation. It marks the exact boundary between an unusual report and a supported conclusion. Erasing that boundary makes the history simpler but false. Return to 1969. The Air Force closed a 22-year sequence of investigations without explaining every report. That date is not proof that the mystery ended. It is proof that the institution changed its decision about responsibility. The files remained, carrying both explanations and unresolved fragments into public view. That is why Blue Book still matters. It teaches a difficult rule for reading declassified history. Government interest is not government confirmation. Missing evidence is not positive evidence. An official conclusion is not the same as complete knowledge. The honest space between those statements is less dramatic than legend. It is also more revealing. The last secret in Project Blue Book is not a hidden answer waiting on one page. It is the architecture of uncertainty itself. Reports became cases. Cases became categories. Categories became statistics. Statistics became policy. Then policy became cultural memory. At every step, complexity was compressed, and confidence sometimes grew faster than evidence. The National Archives preserves the material needed to examine that process. It cannot restore every lost observation. It cannot decide what incomplete evidence never established. That burden remains with the reader. Follow the provenance. Separate a report from its verification. Separate classification from content. Separate an unidentified event from an identified cause. In 1969, hundreds of files still resisted conventional explanation. They remain historical questions with unequal evidence, not interchangeable proof of one answer. The distinction is unsatisfying. It is also the only conclusion the surviving record can honestly support. So subscribe for documented history, not myths. Tomorrow, the next number behind Project Blue Book, what the declassified files do and do not show.